Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for checking into McNulty's Book Corral. Today we're talking about Andre Norton, the science fiction fantasy writer who was born in 1912 and died in 2005. She was really Alice Mary Norton, and in 1934, after she began her writing career, she changed her name to Andre Norton because she was aware that the genre fiction was a male-dominant industry. And it didn't take long for her to establish herself. By the 1950s, however, everybody knew that Andre Norton was Alice Mary Norton. There's even an essay in one of the books by Lynn Carter where he talks about that in the 1950s. She was a best-selling author of fantasy and science fiction. Now, for me, we're talking also about the nurturing power of books. In reading her again after I injured myself, you'll recall in March of this year, I had a lot of time to sit in this chair and others and read. And I recalled being in Teotihuacan at the Pyramid of the Sun and the Moon in the Avenue of the Dead. It was the first time I had left the country. And I have a picture popping up of the Avenue of the Dead and the Pyramid of the Sun. And it was a difficult period for me because I was I was abused by, unfortunately, a teacher in high school who treated me, did a lot of damage to me. And I was a nerdy, introverted kid. The person that I was when I was 16 is obviously no longer the person that I am today. And I'm a forgiving man. I don't even know if this person's still alive. But I was remembering that difficult period when I was rereading some of Andre Norton's books. And we're going to start out with the Witch World series. This is the first paperback edition of the Witch World series. So the Witch World was first published in, what is the date here? 63. And she had a lot of stuff with Ace paperbacks. Really cool material. This is the edition that I read, which would have been a later printing, I think. And so 72, 73, I'm leaving the country for the first time. But books bring back memories, don't they? So this was a book talking about the nurturing power of book. This book fascinated me. It's about Simon Tregarth, and this is post-war America. The story takes place post-war America. He's a military guy with a lot of skills, and he gets tracked down, and he has to make a choice to stay alive. He has to, the ancient stone of power, he has to give himself over to it, which assesses his abilities and then sends him to another alternate universe where his abilities can best be served. That would be the Witch World, which is run by females. And it has all the hallmarks of great Andre Norton material. World building, good pacing, action, characterization, motivations are well defined. And we're going to talk more about what she does as a writer as I show you some others. So this was the first in a series I actually own. This was the one I first read. Then I picked up this, and I actually have another copy of this. So Witch World became something important for me to be nurtured because I really tapped into Andre Norton's world building. Now, because she was a female using a male name, she was consciously, acutely, I should say, aware of the male dominance in the writing industry, especially genre fiction. She wrote from a male-dominant perspective for many, many years. Yes, there are female characters in here, but they're secondary. Are they fascinating? Absolutely. All of her characters are fascinating, but she wrote from the male perspective, even doing it in the third person. And she did a lot of that. It isn't until later I start to see, and I have a lot of her stuff, okay? I'm not an expert on Andre Norton. I haven't read every single book she wrote, but I see later on with some books where she gets into stronger female protagonists. And she was good at everything she did. But in the 50s, in the 1950s, and I have more examples to show you, she really took off with science fiction. And so this is the 60s and into the 70s and even later. So anyways, let's keep on with Witch World for a moment. So Witch World was number one. Then she did That was 63. Then she did Web of the Witch World in 64 the following year. I have 2 copies of this. I'll have scans coming up of Web of the Witch World. I want to point out with this has more of a science fiction 1970s look to it. And this one, though, this earlier one, and this is an Ace. Ace did great covers. So with Andre Norton, you can see from this cover, and you see this not only in Witch World, but you see it throughout all of her books. Maybe all is too inclusive. 95%. She involves herself in creating alien worlds, alternate realities by utilizing elements of Norse mythology, medieval history, Welsh, English, Scottish history, Germanic history is involved, and those elements get reimagined in her worlds. This is one of her strengths as a writer. This is one of her primary allures. You get into what she's doing. And with Witch World, I think she did a marvelous job. So anyways, Web of Witch World is number 2. And then we have 3 Against the Witch World. And these are all, I believe these are all still Ace. Yeah, all of these are Ace. And this one was 65. You'll notice that these are starting to, the cover artwork is starting to change. Ace Books did put out great cover artwork. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But if you're interested in being introduced to Andre Norton, to nurture yourself as I did because of the nature of my circumstances when I was 16 and 17 years old, you will find that she is rewarding. We're going to talk about some other elements in a minute. All right, now I don't have every single Witch World book, but I have Warlock of the Witch World, which was 67. You're starting to get into the swinging 60s style of artwork with her books. That's not unusual. Every publisher adapted to the period in which they were publishing. And then we have Sorceress of the Witch World, and this has more of a Frank Frazetta style influenced book. Sorceress was 68, and this is a good. They're all good. I kept them because I love them. You know, I only reread a couple of them for here. I reread Witch World. Actually, right after I injured myself, I reread Witch World, the first one that I showed you. Year of the Unicorn is also one of them. This comes from, this was 65. I think this is set in the Witch World universe. So in addition to the main Witch World titles, she had related titles that were kind of set in the same universe. Andre Norton wrote a lot of books that are series. She wrote a lot of sequels to her own books. Now, the good news is you can read them as standalones if you want to. She was such a skilled writer. You're up to date, and you'll get the idea. You don't necessarily have to read them all. I'm going to make an exception on that statement with the next group of books I show you, because those are my favorites. All right, so this was a Year of the Unicorn. Now we're talking about cover artwork. In previous episodes, I've told you this is another edition of Year of the Unicorn. And I want you to look at this scan I have up. This has a very 1950s look to it, even though it's a 65 publication. And when we're talking about cover artwork, I've talked about this before. If you need man cave artwork, if you need artwork for a den, a pool room, a bar, I have a bar, my own bar up north at the cabin in my garage. My brother-in-law John and I built a bar, and we decorate it with stuff. You can. This is a great. It's simple, it's effective, but it's mysterious. It has a very 1950s look to it, as I mentioned, and I think this is a great piece of artwork for a wall. You know, and you get that with a lot of Andre Norton's work or any of the Ace paperbacks. Really fun material. All right, so you DAW fans out there, you know what this is. DAW number 1 with the yellow spine and then the yellow logo and the numbering up here. DAW number 1 was Andre Norton's Spell of the Witch World, and here it is. And Spell of the Witch World was 72. DAW number 1. I am a DAW collector. I have tons of DAWs. I have DAWs I don't know I have. What a wonder! The first two, I don't know, the first 250 are the best. They're still publishing DAW. I don't buy them. The last one I read that was a DAW book was something by Patrick Rothfuss, and I will never read him again. He's a great writer, but I just saw some interviews with him, and he wrote an introduction to one of his novellas, and it was the most egotistical piece of writing I've ever seen. So I'm done with him. Sometimes you get turned off by their personalities, even though he is a great writer. Anyways, DAW. I got off track there. My apologies. DAW number 1, Spell of the Witch World. So there you have a really good look at Witch World, which was, and there were many books later with co-authors. I've not read those. This is what I have. I may have some other related universe books with it, but that's the primary bit that I have. And I'm happy I have them. I think they're great. In the 1950s, Andre Norton made her name writing science fiction. However, this is fantasy, science fiction mixed, mostly fantasy, with those elements that I told you about. But with her science fiction novels, she really made a name for herself. And one of them is this wonderful book from 1958, The Time Traders. This is the first of a series. And this features Ross Murdoch is the character who will appear in all of these. I'm going to talk about the first 4. And Ross Murdoch, Travis Fox, and Gordon Ash will be the main protagonists in this. In this one, it's Ross Murdoch, and I think Ash was in this one. So here's the setup. This is what she does. He's a time traveler, government sponsored, and they discovered that the Russians have a way to go back in time, and they believe that there is information in the past, such as a spaceship, which will be part of the next one, that the Russians are after. She doesn't call them Russians. This is the 1950s. She calls them Reds. And Ross Murdoch is going to go back in time, and they have to get to the event site for whatever the Russians or the Reds are looking for before they can use it against the world. Now, how does she handle that? When it comes to her science fiction, Andre Norton generalizes everything. They can travel through time. This is a group of guys that can do this. In the series, she doesn't give you scientific time-space theorem, quantum theories, or any of that. She generalizes everything, and it works. It works because you're wrapped up in the plot, and the plot will be key with this series. The plot, where they end up, how they manage it, what dangers are they in. That's the guts of it, That's what keeps you turning the pages, and the characters are well defined. So, as far as the time travel device, they have a time travel device. We're going to go back 20,000 years, and we're going to find out what these Reds are after. We're going to get it before them, bring it back. We have that technical capability in our ship. That's all she needs to say. She does it in such a generic way. In the hands of a lesser writer, that wouldn't work. Especially during the 1950s when, science fiction became the number 1 genre next to romance as far as selling paperbacks, right? So that's the setup. Talk about cover artwork. Isn't this beautiful? Great stuff. I love Ace books. Are always fun. And then we're going to have number 2 was Galactic Derek 59. This features Ross Murdoch, Travis Fox, who is an Apache. He's Native American. And then we have Gordon Ash as well. They all play a role in the series. In this one, this is actually my favorite. And this is my favorite of the 4 because what she does here is they go back in time. It starts out in modern times. So follow the plot. They're in modern times. They're in 1959 America. The Reds are a problem. And they have a device to go back 20,000 years, and they have to be careful of the Cro-Magnon man and the cavemen and dinosaurs. They have to be careful. They have to overcome these events and get to the spacecraft. The wreck of an alien race that wreck can only be found in the past. she doesn't necessarily need to explain why that is. And I don't recall, I reread this one, I don't recall that she did. She just generalizes, like I said, everything, but you don't care because you're wrapped up. How are they gonna survive being 20,000 years in the past? You got the Reds after them. You've got all of these elements from that time period that are dangerous, and they have to come back. Well, they come back to modern times, and guess what? Then the plot changes yet again, and they're on another universe and another planet. Hence, you get the hardcore science fiction elements in addition to fantasy elements, and you have a Native American thrown in for cultural references. Travis Fox is an Apache. This is, for me, one of the best in the series. I love them all, but really a marvelous, marvelous book. And again, that plot is driven by these suspenseful events and the surprise. I was surprised that they ended up in another galaxy type thing in spaceships and everything after being 20,000 years in the past and coming back. She was just skilled at that. All right, so number 3, which is also really good. Number 3 is Travis Fox's, he becomes the main protagonist, and they're going back to the time of Genghis Khan with the Apache. His skills are put to good use in this book, and this is a pretty good one too. I mean, I'm saying they're all really good. If you can't find an interest in Witch World and you're interested in getting involved in what's the deal with Andre Norton, who remains popular. She has a very, very strong following to this day, and I'm happy about that. This series, these first 4 are fantastic all the way. The Defiant Agents is number 3. Time Traders, Galactic, Derelict, and the Defiant Agents is number 3. And then the 4th one I have is Key Out of Time, which was 1963. She was, obviously, when you look at the dates of her publications, 55 to 65, she put out, I don't know, she must have put out 50 books. I don't really know. I've lost track of it. This is also a really good one. This begins with scuba diving underwater. I love it. She can take you to a location in modern times or in an alien world and make it work. And she doesn't do it with flowery language. She's not that type of writer, but she's an imagistic writer, so you can see the movie unfolding in your mind, which is what good literature should do. Marvelous series by Andre Norton. I really like her stuff. I have stacks of her books here. All right, so those are the 2 primary series I'm going to recommend if you've not read Andre Norton. You can begin with the first book in each series. You can begin with the Time Traders, and you can begin with Witch World if you're interested in looking at that. I know there have been multiple reprints of her books. I didn't look to see what's available now. I'm sure there's plenty out there. All right, so I have another little stack here, and I have a stack over there on the desk, too. I'm not going to go into the plots on these, but, we have some favorites. The Crossroads of Time, you can tell by this. You can tell by the covers, that Ace put out covers that reflected the plot line. You have time travel again going on here, and this is Blake Walker, and that's a marvelous book. What was the year on this one? I didn't write anything down for this. There's a sequel to this called Quest Cross Time, too, that I have. This is 56, so this goes back, although this looks like a 1970s or 1980s reprint. One of my favorites, it's another DAW. Okay, you DAW collectors out there? DAW number 152, Merlin's Mirror. Yes, really a wonderful standalone fantasy. And this was 1975 from her, and it involves Merlin and King Arthur. And I'm not aware that there's a sequel or a prequel to this. It seems to be a standalone, and I love it. It's one of my favorite of her books. So Merlin's Mirror, this would also be a good introduction if you haven't read her. Here's another one talking about male dominant science fiction novels And this is another Ace classic. This is a traditional science fiction title. This is 57. Boy, she wrote a lot of science fiction in 1957. It is. A lot of it's forgotten. Here's Night of Masks, which is an alternate world. And I'll just look at the date on this was 64. Remember what I said, 55 to 65. I can't even tell you. I don't know if there's a complete bibliography online. If there is, somebody let me know. Again, mixing up the world. She was well represented by Ace Books. Sea Siege, with some science fiction elements in here. And this is 57. Good God. She was so prolific in that period. And she lived for decades and decades, and she was quite old when she passed. All right, so then she has two that are related. Victory on Janus with the green alien. This is cool. And then Judgment on Janus. This is a better cover. And I forget which came first. I think Judgment on Janus came first. Let's take a look here. This is 63. No surprise there. And Victory on Janus was 66. So read this first, then this. That you could read them as separate books. Again, she did this. High Sorcery is a good fantasy. You'll note medieval elements here, Norse elements in her books. She studied history. This woman was a brain, okay? I talk about feeding your brains. This woman fed her brain. Okay, beautiful. One of my favorites, Dread Companion. Now this one goes back to, this is 1970. So this is the one about the Changeling Girl. I read this in high school about the same time I read Witch World. And yes, this is a great book. I don't know if there were others. Yeah, I think there was. I think Baen Books put out a compilation of the two books relating to this group of characters. So, Dread Companion, top of the line. All right, some other aces. How about Ordeal and Otherwhere? You get science fiction elements. And I'm just going to go through some of these fast. I have more over there. It's too much to I don't want to overwhelm you. Secret of the Lost Race. Again, male dominant cover artwork during the 1950s and 60s when she was writing all that hardcore science fiction and selling it to the male audience. This is 59 again. And here's another one, Starguard. You have a male spaceman on the cover. This is a breathtaking novel of outer space, and it's Andre Norton this is 55. It's Andre Norton making sure she is selling books in a male-dominant industry with male-dominant readership, with male-dominant characters that she wrote as well as anybody could. She does get into female characters, as I mentioned, much later. Maybe earlier. Again, I haven't read everything, but what I'm seeing in the 50s and through the 60s are a slow transition to more dominant female characters. Here's a classic, The Stars Are Ours. Classic science fiction cover. 2500 AD. This is about Dard Nordis, a young man who sought escape through spaceflight. And The Stars Are Ours. I just have to check this again. Guess what year? 54. She was just so good. She was just so good at what she did. These are fantastic books. If you can find them on the aftermarket, eBay. I found part of my collection I found in secondhand bookstores in my travels. And Quest Cross Time. This is the other one that relates to the other time travel book that I showed you about. This is an Ace classic science fiction cover. All of these covers would make fantastic man cave artwork. 65 again. How prolific was this wonderful woman? I'm just going to get up real quick, and I'm going to grab this. I'm back. So I have two copies of High Sorcery. I don't know how that happened. This is another Daw book. Daw 45. Garen the Eternal, that is clearly a fantasy. She does have straightforward fantasy. Still, always, almost exclusively, she's using elements from Norse mythology, Germanic history, Irish and Scottish history, English, etc. And I think she was so skilled at fusing that, and her world building was superb. Daybreak, 2250 AD. Yes. Gosh, wonderful. Lord of Thunder, here's another Ace book with a very interesting cover with a cat, a spaceship, and a weird-looking magician with, what is it, a dove or an eagle on there. And I'm going to look at the date on this, and you can tell by the cover this has to be 50s or 60s, and this is 62. She wrote between 55 and 65, I think. Excuse me. She wrote a world of classics between 1955 and 1965. She deserves a rediscovery, and I know she has a following. All right, I talked about Baen books. Yes, here's Dark Companion, which from Baen. So this is a reprint. This is a modern reprint of Dread Companion that I showed you in Dark Piper. And big fat book for you to read. And I have another one. This is also Baen. This is called The Forerunner Factor, which is, and I don't have scans of these, sorry, which features two short novels, two long novels, Forerunner and Forerunner, the Second Venture, its sequel. So because she wrote a lot of books as a series, and she wrote books that just have sequels to them, occasionally a prequel, again, it's okay to read them as standalones because she was the type of author that brought you up to date with a lot of generalizations. It's interesting that she was able to do that because, I see her as a major force in genre writing, in science fiction, in fantasy in the 1950s through the 80s, and even later. She had, in the last decades of her life, she had co-authors. And I still pick up Andre Norton if I don't have one and I see it at a good price and good shape. I would pick it up to this day. And I have a few more over there too, but I have that's enough to show you for today. I think I made my point. I hope I did. A celebration of books that can nurture you, and that was the theme of this, to nurture you at various stages in our lives if we need something to take our minds and entertain us and enlighten us at the same time. Be nurtured, my friends. Stay well. Stay happy. Feed your beautiful brains. Read a book.